I was 24 when this took place, and even now, nearly 3 years later, it replays in my mind whenever I walk home at night. My name is Hannah, and at the time I lived in a quiet little town called Fairview. It sat between a busy highway and a long stretch of forest. Fairview wasn't known for being particularly dangerous, not compared to the larger cities close by, but it also wasn't the sort of place where you could wander freely without caution. Back then I was working at a late-night diner named Miller's Griddle, only about 10 minutes from my house if I went through the town park. I usually cut through that way after shifts since it saved me at least 15 minutes compared to the main streets. My parents always pushed me to drive instead, but honestly, I couldn't afford one at the time. Between rent, utilities, and trying to chip away at student debt, walking was my only choice. I wasn't reckless about it though. I kept a small canister of pepper spray in my pocket. I'd taken a basic self-defense class in college, and I always made sure my phone was fully charged before leaving work. Still, that little thought in the back of my head always whispered that no matter how careful I tried to be, it only took one bad night. That bad night, the one carved into my memory, was a Wednesday in late October. The air was icy and burned when you inhaled, and every breath turned to a ghostly mist in the cold. I had just finished a long double shift at Miller's. My friend and coworker Elise was clocking out at the same time, but she lived in the opposite direction. "Are you sure you don't want me to walk at least part of the way with you?" she asked, tugging her coat tighter. I shook my head. "No, really, I'll be okay. I've walked this route 100 times. Besides, your kids are waiting for you. Go home." She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Just text me when you're in, all right? I'll sleep easier." "I will," I told her, meaning it. We waved goodbye, and I pulled my hood up against the cold before stepping out. The streets were hushed. Most of the businesses on Main Street had closed by 9, leaving the sidewalks empty, except for the occasional car that passed. The park sat between the center of town and the blocks where I lived. It wasn't big, just a few winding trails, a small play area, and an old wooden bridge stretching over a stream. During daylight, kids played there, people jogged, and college students lounged in the grass. At night, it transformed into something else entirely. The lamps scattered along the path barely touched the shadows. Every movement in the trees felt like it was meant for you, but I had grown used to it. I always repeated to myself, "It's fine. You're only imagining it. Just get through and you'll be home." That night, all I really wanted was a hot shower and my bed. About halfway across the park, that creeping sensation rose over me, the one that climbs your spine when you know someone is behind you. At first, I tried brushing it off. I told myself it was the cold or maybe just nerves, but then I heard it. Footsteps. Not right behind me, but slow, steady, purposeful. I glanced back. At first, nothing. The path stretched into a tunnel of trees, the lights weak and uneven. I nearly convinced myself I was overthinking until the noise came again. Crunch, crunch, shoes on gravel. I slowed slightly, turned, and that's when I saw him. A man in dark clothes, hood pulled up. He was maybe 50 feet back, but his pace wasn't casual. He wasn't jogging. He wasn't simply crossing the park to get home. He was tracking me. My chest tightened, and I quickly looked away, trying not to let on that I'd noticed. I muttered to myself, maybe he's just walking the same way. Don't assume the worst. But then his steps grew quicker. I pulled out my phone, pretending to check a message. The glow lit my hands, and for a moment I considered calling Elise, but something pride, or maybe a fear of seeming foolish, made me shove it back in my pocket. I picked up my pace. He matched it. The path narrowed as it reached the wooden bridge. My pulse thundered with each step. My fingers curled around the pepper spray in my pocket, thumb pressed against the nozzle. "It's okay," I whispered. "Just cross, just cross." But as soon as I stepped onto the bridge, it happened. A hand clamped onto my wrist. Another crushed hard over my mouth. I tried to scream, but it came out muffled against his palm. "Stop fighting," a low voice hissed by my ear. His breath stank of cigarettes. "It'll be easier." Panic surged, hot and blinding. Every instinct screamed. I bit down on his hand as hard as I could. He cried out, just enough for me to yank my spray free. I spun, aimed, and blasted his face. The mist caught him full on. He staggered back, swearing and clawing at his eyes. I didn't hesitate. I bolted, sprinting across the bridge with every ounce of energy. My legs burned, but adrenaline forced me forward. Behind me, I heard him howling, but terrifyingly I could also hear him still moving, still after me. When I reached my block, I didn't stop running until I slammed against my front door. My hands shook wildly as I fought with the keys. Finally bursting inside, I locked the door, leaned against it, gasping for air. For a moment, silence filled the house. So still, I almost convinced myself I was safe. Then I remembered. My parents were out of town visiting my aunt. I was completely alone. I crept upstairs, peeked through my curtains and froze. He was there, standing across the street. The hood still shadowed his face, but I knew it was him. His stance, the tilt of his head, fixed directly at my window. My stomach plummeted. "Oh my God," I whispered. He didn't move. For what felt endless, he just stood watching. Then suddenly, he turned and sprinted away, swallowed by the night. I never saw him again. I called the police that night, trembling so badly I could hardly form sentences. They sent a cruiser, took my statement and searched the area, but found nothing. For weeks after, sleep was impossible. Every creak outside rattled me. I never crossed the park again. I begged Elise for rides whenever she could manage. People told me I was lucky, that it could have ended far worse, and they were right. But the image that won't leave me is seeing him standing across the street, watching me, after I thought I'd escaped. Because the truth is, I don't know if he ever truly left, or if he's still out there, waiting for the right night to come back. I was 19 years old when this took place, and even now it remains the most terrifying ordeal of my life. I've replayed it in my head more times than I could ever count, and no matter how much I try to reason through it, the memory still leaves me trembling. My name is Ethan Price, and back then I lived in a quiet rural town in Oregon, surrounded by wide stretches of farmland and dense woods that seemed to go on forever. Everyone knew each other there. The town only had a single grocery store, a couple of diners, one gas station, and a Domino's where I worked part-time while finishing community college classes. I had started there at 17, mostly working night shifts. It was the kind of job where you bonded quickly with coworkers since everyone was struggling in one way or another, whether it was saving for school, paying rent, or just scraping by. I didn't really mind. The pay wasn't great, but the routine of tossing dough, folding pizza boxes, and joking with friends behind the counter helped the hours pass. The only real downside was the long walk home. I didn't own a car at the time. I'd been saving, but tuition, books, and bills always drained my money before I could get there. My house sat nearly 3 miles away, and the fastest route was down Maple Creek Road, which cut straight through the forest. By day, it wasn't bad at all. In the mornings, when the fog clung to the treetops and the sunrise burned through, it almost felt beautiful. But after dark, once the last traces of sunlight were gone, those woods became something else entirely, silent, watchful, and deeply unnerving. My mom had insisted I carry pepper spray, worried more than I ever did. Nothing had happened to me out there before, and I figured trees were just trees. That night, though, my shift ended later than usual. I typically clocked out by 6:30, but right before close 2 big orders came in for pickup, which pushed us well past cleanup. By the time I clocked out, it was 7:40, and the sky was already black. I said goodbye to Maya, a coworker, as she locked up. She asked if I'd be fine walking, her hoodie pulled tight against the chill. I shrugged it off with a smile, saying it wasn't my first night. She teased me to finally get a car, though I could tell she meant it seriously. "Working on it," I told her. She waved and left for the parking lot, where her boyfriend waited in his truck. I slung my backpack and started my walk. The town streets were silent. Neon buzzed from the gas station sign, and the drone of a vending machine echoed as I passed the grocery store. Within 10 minutes, I had left the small town behind and was stepping into the woods. Maple Creek Road stretched ahead like a black ribbon. Pines towered on both sides, blotting out the night sky. No sidewalks, just a slim shoulder and a sharp ditch. Occasionally, headlights tore through the dark as cars passed, but mostly it was me, the trees, and the crunch of gravel underfoot. Halfway through the woods, I heard something. Not loud, just a faint rustling like dry leaves under a footstep. I froze, scanning the tree line with my phone light. Nothing, only trunks and shadows. "Probably a deer," I muttered, forcing myself to breathe. Then a small rock skipped across the road and landed 2 feet ahead of me. My chest clenched. That wasn't an animal. I swung my light back toward the trees, and that's when I saw him. A man stood between the trunks about 20 feet away. His dark clothes blended into the night, but his outline was clear enough. He raised a hand and waved slowly, deliberately. Instinct told me to keep walking, but instead I heard myself call out, "Hey, do you need something?" His reply was low and sharp, like a whisper forced louder. "Hey, come over here. I want to show you something." Every nerve in me screamed to run. I said I had to get home, trying to keep steady. His voice came again, more insistent, almost desperate. "It'll only take a second. I really need your help." I hesitated, my mother's warnings ringing in my ears. "Don't stop for strangers in the dark." But his tone wasn't outright threatening at first. It sounded like pleading. Against all reason, I heard myself say, "I'll help, but I only have a minute." "That's all it'll take," he whispered. I stepped off the road, gravel crunching under my sneakers. My flashlight trembled in my hand as I moved closer. He stayed still until I was nearly beside him, then pointed deeper into the forest. "There, look," he said. I followed his gesture and saw a deep, wide pit. At first I thought it was natural, maybe a sinkhole, but the edges were too smooth, too precise. Someone had dug it. "What is that?" I asked. "Found it earlier," he murmured, his voice suddenly close, right behind me. "I want to know what's down there. Don't have a light. Shine yours." My gut twisted hard. None of this was right. Still, I leaned forward slightly, holding my phone over the pit. The beam of light sliced into the darkness below, but I never saw what was inside because at that instant he shoved me. My balance slipped, and I plunged down nearly 20 feet. I hit the bottom with a painful thud, breath knocked out of me, my side aching. The ground felt strange, soft and damp beneath my palms. Groaning, I scrambled to my knees and swung my light around. That's when I saw her. A girl about my age, sprawled lifeless beside me. Her skin was pale, her body marred with cuts and bruises. She was naked, unmistakably dead. A wave of ice surged through me. My throat tightened, bile rising as I gagged. Above, his shadow hovered at the edge of the pit. I screamed up at him, demanding what the hell this was, but he didn't reply. By the time I dragged myself toward the dirt wall and tried to climb, he was already gone. I don't know how long I stayed down there. Half an hour, maybe more. My hands shook as I clawed at the sides, slipping over and over, until I finally managed to haul myself out. My phone battery was almost gone by then. I stumbled back to the road, barely walking, more like staggering and gasping, sobbing, glancing behind me every few steps. When I reached my front door, my clothes were smeared with dirt, my throat raw from yelling. I didn't go to the police. I didn't even tell my parents. The only thing I did was call my closest friend Ryan and choke out what had happened through ragged breaths, swearing him to silence. For days I avoided Maple Creek Road. Sleep barely came. When I finally worked up the courage to check the news, there was nothing. No missing person, no report, no mention of a body. It was like none of it existed. But I know what I saw. I know what I landed on down there, and I know that man is still out in those woods. Even now, passing them in daylight, I feel eyes on me, watching, waiting, and I can't shake the dread that one night, someone else will hear a whisper in the dark and make the same mistake I did. I grew up in a South Texas city that most people would describe as gritty and worn down. My block wasn't the sort of place you'd brag about living in. The sidewalks were cracked and uneven. The corner stores had metal bars covering their windows, and every night there was that constant wail of sirens drifting through the air like an unending reminder of trouble. But when you're a teenager, you adjust. You stop noticing the street lamps that barely flicker, the stale smoke that lingers around bus stops, and the shouting matches that erupt from time to time down the block. I was 18 years old when this happened. My name is Isabella, though most people just called me Izzy. My mother was firm about curfews, always home by 10, no excuses. She'd repeat it constantly, even though she was fully aware of the kind of area we lived in. Sometimes I hated her rules, but deep down, I got it. It wasn't about punctuality. It was about survival. That evening I was at my friend Carla's place. She lived a few streets away, and we'd spent the night in her room scrolling through songs, gossiping about school drama, and laughing at her little brother who kept sneaking around trying to overhear us. When I noticed the time flashing 9:45, I panicked. "Crap, my mom is going to kill me," I muttered as I grabbed my backpack. Carla walked me to the door and asked, "Want me to have my brother walk you home?" I shook my head. "No, it's fine. I'll just go through the tunnel. I've done it 100 times. I'll make it before 10. Carla frowned, uneasy. "That tunnel creeps me out. You never know who's hanging around in there." I tried to joke. "Yeah, well, my mom will tear me apart if I'm late. Being scared is the lesser problem." But in truth, I wasn't fond of that tunnel either. It was this long underpass running beneath the highway that split the neighborhood. During the day, it wasn't too bad. You'd see kids skating or workers biking through. But once night came, it changed completely. The weak orange bulbs flickered constantly, and every step you took bounced back at you from the walls, like someone else was walking right behind. Sometimes people hung around inside, smoking or drinking, but they mostly kept their distance. That night I adjusted my straps and quickened my pace toward it. The air was suffocating, that thick South Texas heat that clings to your skin even long after sunset. I could hear the muted roar of traffic above, muffled by concrete. As soon as I entered, my footsteps rang out, echoing sharply. I kept my head low and eyes straight. That was the rule. Don't stare, don't stall, just get to the end. I was halfway through when I heard it, the sound of another set of footsteps following mine. I froze for just a second before forcing myself to keep walking. At first I brushed it off as coincidence, just another passerby. But the rhythm grew louder, sharper, deliberate. My chest thudded, then came a voice. "Hey." I turned slightly, just enough to see him out of the corner of my eye. He looked late 20s or early 30s, tall, scruffy, wearing an old hoodie. The dim light caught his eyes in a way that made my stomach churn. "You're really pretty," he said with a crooked grin. "Want to hang out sometime?" I managed a stiff smile, though my throat was dry. Thanks, but I'm only 18. I've got a boyfriend." He smirked, brushing that aside. "So what? You can still give me your number." My grip tightened around my backpack straps. "No, I don't think so. I just need to get home." He chuckled under his breath. "Don't be like that. I'm just being friendly." His pace quickened, closing the gap. My pulse skyrocketed. I sped up too, eyes locked on the faint glow of the exit. Almost there. Just a few more steps. Suddenly, two rough hands seized me from behind. One clamped around my neck, squeezing until my vision blurred, while the other yanked at my arm. My backpack slid off my shoulder. "Don't scream," he hissed in my ear. Terror flooded me. I thrashed, stomping on his foot, clawing at his arm, gasping for air through his crushing grip. Amid the chaos, my fingers brushed the small pocket knife I always carried. Without hesitation, I flipped it open and slashed at his arm. He howled, a raw guttural cry echoing through the tunnel. His hold loosened and I shoved myself free, stumbling forward. I didn't look back. I bolted. My sneakers pounded against the concrete, my breath jagged, the tunnel lights blurring through my tears. Behind me, I could still hear him screaming, cursing in agony. When I burst out into the street, I didn't dare turn around. I sprinted the final block, chest burning, legs trembling. At my front door, I fumbled with the keys, dropped them, then finally forced my way inside. I collapsed on the floor, sobbing as my mom rushed from the kitchen, panic in her eyes. "Izzy, what happened?" I could barely choke the words. "Some guy. He grabbed me in the tunnel. He tried." My voice cracked. My dad came from the living room, face steeled. "Call the cops," he told her. That night I sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, giving a shaky statement to the officers. They combed through the tunnel but found nothing, just a smear of blood on the wall. The man was gone. For weeks afterward, I couldn't walk past that underpass without my chest tightening. I started carrying pepper spray everywhere. Sometimes my boyfriend Marco would escort me, his hand gripping mine as we walked through. But even then, my eyes scanned every shadow, expecting someone to emerge. I never saw that man again. Yet even now, whenever footsteps echo behind me at night, even if it's just a stranger on the sidewalk, I feel phantom hands tightening around my throat. I hear his voice in my ear, and I know I'll never feel safe in that tunnel again. I never pictured myself as the kind of person who'd wind up in a story like this. Truthfully, my life had always been plain, nothing remarkable. My name is Daniel Alvarez. I was 24 back then, living in a medium-sized town in southern Arizona called Fair Point. It was the sort of place where everyone either knew you or at least recognized your name. The neighborhoods were quiet, lined with faded houses, the summer air thick with the smell of mesquite, and streets that seemed unsettlingly vacant once the sun went down. I worked at a discount retail chain named Value Max. Not glamorous, not miserable either. The paycheck covered the basics, though the job wore on me. The holiday season was the worst. The store turned into chaos. A swarm of impatient people returning items or snapping at you while you plastered on the mandatory plastic smile. Even when someone treated you like less than a person, you had to grin through it. Still, I tried to be the upbeat one. My mother always said I had the Christmas spirit when I was little, so maybe that never left me. Even in December, when most of my coworkers grew bitter, I still offered Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays with genuine warmth. It wasn't an act, it was my way of surviving it all. If I kept pushing joy outward, maybe some of it would stick to me. That Christmas Eve, I was stuck with the closing shift. The doors should have locked at 6, but customers dragged it out until nearly 7, scouring shelves for last-minute gifts. By the time I punched out, my feet ached and my throat felt raw from hours of small talk. I tied my scarf while staring at the lot through the wide front windows. The sun had vanished, leaving behind streaks of orange and pink melting into dark blue. The asphalt shimmered faintly, still damp from a drizzle earlier. There was this strange in-between feeling, anticipation mixed with fatigue, people desperate to get home to their families. That's when I noticed him. A man, maybe mid-40s, cropped black hair, lean frame. He stood at the edge of the parking lot, not walking to a car, not carrying bags, just standing there. At first I assumed he was waiting for a ride, but something about the way he hunched forward unsettled me. He seemed to be muttering to himself. I didn't dwell on it until it clicked. He was the same customer from earlier. He'd come through my line around 5:30. Nothing unusual in his cart. Paper towels, detergent, batteries. Nothing seasonal, nothing odd. Our exchange was civil, though distant. I rang him up, bagged his things, smiled, and handed him his receipt with, "Thank you, sir. Have a happy holiday." He whipped his head toward me so sharply I jumped. His eyes behind thin wire glasses narrowed. "What did you just say?" His voice was low, tense. Caught off guard, I repeated myself. He leaned closer, his breath sour, and hissed, "It's Merry Christmas." I chuckled awkwardly. "Right, Merry Christmas." He kept glaring for a moment, then yanked the bag and left. I brushed it off. Holiday stress did strange things to people, but now, an hour later, he was still out there, loitering, pacing. I tried to convince myself it wasn't worth worrying about. My coworker Adam had already left, leaving me alone. My car sat 4 blocks away. I usually walked. It helped me unwind after long shifts. Yet as soon as I stepped into the cold, I regretted not parking closer. The man remained, pacing. The moment his eyes landed on me, he froze. My pulse quickened as I shoved my hands into my coat pockets. "Don't read into it," I told myself. "Maybe he's just waiting. Just keep moving." I turned onto Maple Street, my regular path home. My sneakers tapped against damp pavement. I didn't want to glance back, but unease forced me to. He was trailing me. Not close, maybe 30 feet behind, but shadowing me step for step. My throat tightened. I tried to rationalize. Coincidence. He must live this direction. Don't spiral. But every corner I rounded, he did too. Every crosswalk I crossed, he followed. 2 blocks in, I stopped pretending it was coincidence. I picked up my pace, pretending to scroll through my phone, hoping the glow of the screen made me look casual. I could hear his steps steady, deliberate behind me. I swallowed hard, whispering under my breath, "Not tonight. Not Christmas Eve, please." At the Ridgeway Park intersection, I veered off the sidewalk and cut across the grass. My shoes soaked instantly in the damp lawn, but I didn't care. Maybe I'd lose him. But when I glanced back, I saw his figure entering the park as well, weaving through the bare trees. Panic erupted inside me. "Why me?" I muttered, voice cracking. I sped up, nearly jogging. The streetlight stretched my shadow across the ground in jagged shapes. I passed the silent playground, the empty courts, pushing until I reached the far end of the park. My apartment was only a block away now. Safety, warmth, almost there. But then I heard it. "Lady has no respect for Christmas." The voice rasped, harsh yet loud enough to pierce the night. I spun around. He was barely 10 feet behind me, face twisted, eyes wild, fists clenched like he was holding back or about to strike. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice breaking. His lips curled. "You mocked Jesus. You don't say Happy Holidays. You say Merry Christmas, or you pay." I stumbled backward, shaking. "I didn't mean anything by it. I'm sorry." He stepped closer. "Sorry doesn't save you." That shattered whatever composure I had. My body screamed flight, and I ran. That last block felt endless. My lungs burned as I gasped for air. I didn't dare look back, but his footsteps and ragged breathing echoed close behind. My trembling hands dug for my keys as I neared my building. "Please, please," I begged under my breath. I shoved the key into the lock, twisted, yanked the door open, and slammed it shut behind me. I pressed my back to the wood, gasping. For a moment, silence, just the hammer of my heartbeat. Then, bang! The door shuddered violently under his fist, or maybe his whole body. I screamed, bolting up the stairs 2 at a time. I burst into my apartment, locked the deadbolt, slid the chain, and collapsed onto the couch, trembling uncontrollably. Through the walls, faint but distinct, I could still hear him. "It's Merry Christmas." Again and again, muffled but undeniable. I stayed awake until sunrise, too rattled to call the police, caught between fear, shock, and disbelief. By morning, the street was quiet, empty. I never saw him again after that. Not once, but every December since. Whenever I walk home at night, I still hear his voice echoing in my head, reprimanding me, reminding me it's Merry Christmas. And because of him, I've never said Happy Holidays again. I always believed moving to Levenford had been the right call. Back in 2020, when I boxed up my things in Glasgow, I convinced myself this was exactly what I needed. A smaller town near the sea where rent wouldn't drain my savings, and where strangers still gave a nod in passing. I was 25 at the time, restless and worn out by city life. The endless noise, the rising crime, and the unshakable sense that someone brushing past you meant trouble had eroded me. I ended up finding a tiny one-bedroom flat above a bakery on Shore Street, close enough to wake up with the scent of fresh bread, but far enough from the pubs that the noise rarely reached me. At first I knew hardly anyone, but slowly I settled into a rhythm. My shifts at the Kingfisher Arms, the pub that took me on behind the bar, grocery runs, and long walks home through the car park into my street. At only 5'1", I've always been aware of how I appear. Walking home late, shoulders pulled in, keys gripped tight in my hand. My mum used to laugh, telling me, "Don't be silly, Maggie, nobody's looking at you like that." But the truth is, I'd already had enough odd encounters here to prove otherwise. This happened last autumn, just after I turned 29. I'd worked a long Friday night shift at the pub, one of those where you finish sticky with beer and sweat. It was nearly midnight when I finally closed up with Jenny, my colleague. We parted ways at the usual corner. She went right, I went left. The walk wasn't far, maybe 20 minutes, but in the dark it always seemed longer. I remember thinking how crisp the air was, the sea breeze drifting inland. The streets weren't fully empty, a car or two passing, porch lights glowing, but quiet enough that every step I made sounded too sharp. I cut through the co-op car park as usual, just a shortcut really. By that time it was normally deserted, maybe a couple of vehicles left overnight. But stepping onto the asphalt that night, I felt it, hard to put into words, like stepping into a room where people had been talking about you, only they'd just gone silent. 3 cars sat there, ordinary enough, but then I saw him, a man at the far end, walking in the same direction. Dark jacket, cap pulled low. Nothing unusual, except something about the way he moved made me watch him. I tried convincing myself I was overthinking. People head home all the time. Still, I slowed, ears tuned. By the time I left the car park for the main road, I checked behind me. Sure enough, he was there, maybe 40 feet back, keeping pace. I crossed to the other pavement, partly checking traffic, partly testing him. He crossed too. My stomach lurched, the kind of drop you feel when instinct takes hold. My grip on the strap of my bag tightened, hand brushing the heavy glass Earn Brew bottle inside. At least I had something, if it came to it. The road ahead stretched long and bare, lit by buzzing orange lamps that left shadows thick between them. My flat was still a mile off. His footsteps drew closer. He caught up faster than I thought, and soon his stride matched mine. Shoulders tense, I kept staring forward. Then came his voice. "Hello there. How are you tonight?" Calm, casual, but far too near. I ignored him. He tried again. "Heading to work?" "No." My reply was clipped, sharp. "Going home then? Do you live along here?" I didn't answer. My grip on the bottle grew so tight my knuckles ached. He edged closer, tilting his head, trying to meet my eyes. "Whereabouts do you stay?" "I know this road well." That question set every alarm screaming. Nobody should ever ask a lone woman at midnight where she lives. I shut down completely, eyes fixed ahead. I slowed, hoping he would pass. He did for a few steps, but then slowed too, forcing me to either walk beside him or hang awkwardly behind. I chose to lag, dragging my steps until I was nearly crawling. He noticed. Up ahead he stopped, turned halfway toward me, waiting as though he had all the time in the world. The wind pushed through the hedges, nothing else stirred. I slipped a hand into my jacket for my phone. Dead. The battery had been failing for months, but I'd assumed it would last the walk. My stomach bottomed out, but I kept my face blank. He began walking again, slower, glancing back. That was when I spotted it, the slim path leading to a block of flats, hidden by thick hedges. Without thinking, I darted down. My heart hammered so loud it filled my ears. Crouched behind the hedges, bottle still clutched, I forced my breath shallow. A minute passed, then 2, then 5. Nothing but the wind and my own pulse. I risked a look. The road lay empty. I stayed hidden nearly 10 minutes before daring to move. Every shifting shadow looked like him. Every rustle made me twitch. When I finally crept out, I checked behind bins, behind bus stops, anywhere he might wait. Nothing. I reached home without seeing him again. Still, the silence of my flat pressed heavy. I locked the door twice, checked every window, sat up for hours with the bottle beside me. I'll never know what that man truly wanted. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he thought he was being friendly. Or maybe he was testing, probing for weakness. What I do know is this. If you see a woman walking alone at night, don't approach her. Don't ask where she lives. Don't crowd her when she's clearly uncomfortable. You may believe you're being polite, but you're not. And if you're the one being followed, trust your gut. I'd rather overreact than regret silence. That night I lost him, but even now every time I cross that car park after a shift, my chest knots tight, waiting to hear footsteps behind me again.